Hello, my name is Antonio Lopez Jr. and this is assignment 2 of CSC 300. So for this assignment, we had to create a project where it asked the user to input two values of any data types that they prefer, and in return, we are going to give them the sum of the correct data types that were given to us. So before I run the code, I just want to show you what it looks like so you have an idea of what to expect. So first thing, we have our basic system outs telling the user what to do, or what it is. And here on our line 13 is where we first ask the user to input their first value. Line 17 is where we ask the user to input their second value. And for line 24, for this for loop, we are running the for loop until the end of the string, and for each character in the string, we are checking two things. We are checking to see if the character at I is equal to a period, and if that's true, we add 1 to the counter 1 variable. And our second check inside this for loop is if the character at I is equal to a letter, then we add 1 to the letter counter. And for the second for loop on line 39, it is the same for loop. It's just the only difference is we are checking the second input value. So once that's done, we go down to the if statements here on line 42, and here we check to see what the contents of the string is, or the strings are. And the first if statement here we have that is checking to see if the strings, or if the inputs are strings. So the if statement says if the letter counter 1 is equal to the user input 1 length, and if the letter counter 2 is equal to the user input 2 length, then we execute the sum method, which just adds both of these two strings together. And the thought behind this was that if the user inputs all letters, then the letter counter has to equal the same length as the string, because the letter counter is counting how many letters are in the string. So that's the first if statement. The second if statement checks to see if the inputs are integers. And it's saying if both the letter counters are equal to 0 and both counters are equal to 0, then we can create two new variables that are data types ints, named current num1 and current num2. And here it is being set equal to the conversion from string to int. So that's what this method does here. But before I show what the method looks like, I want to finish up the rest of the else if statements. And once that finishes converting, then we call the sum function with the newly converted integer variables. And just to give another little explanation on the if statement, it's basically saying if the string has no letters and no periods, then we know it's an int. So we create this. So the second else if statement here is checking to see if the inputs are double. And so it's saying if both the counters are equal to 1, and if any of the letter counters are equal to 0, then we can create two new variables of double data types named current num1 and current num2, and that's going to be set equal to the string to double conversion, which is this method here. And then we do the same thing, we call the sum to add up both of these doubles. And so what the if statement is saying here is if the string contains one period and has no letters, then we know it's a double. And so that's that. That's the second one. And then the else statement here is it is just gonna add up what's left. So anything that just didn't make it to the else if statements up top. So whatever's left, this is gonna put it together and call it a day. So that's the main project there basically. But now here we have our methods where we do the string to int or string to double. So the first one is our string to double, string to int, and it is named intCov, which takes in a string parameter. And what it does is it's going to create three new variables that are all data type ints, that is named cur, num and result. And for this for loop here, it's gonna run until the length of the string. And what it does is each time it's gonna initialize num to 0 and cur equal to the character at I. And so num is gonna be equal to cur, which minus 48, which is basically grabbing the ASCII number. So what cur does is, num does is it's just grabbing the ASCII number. And so this for loop here is basically my power function. Since we couldn't use math pow, I had to use a for loop instead. So that's that. And then here we have result plus equal num, which is just gonna keep piling up the number. And then here we return the result. And that's it. That's the first one. And so the second one here, we have our second method is the string to double. And it's the same thing, taking in parameter string. And here we create 3 new variables, 2 being ints named before dot and after dot, and then a third being a Boolean type named flag dot set equal to false. And so for this for loop, the conditions is the same as above, but this time it's checking to see where the period is and how many number places are before the period and after the period. That's what it's doing. So here it's checking to see how many numbers are after the period. Here it's checking to see where the period is. And then since we don't know where the period is yet, it's just going to keep adding the number until we get to the period, and then it's never going to reach this line ever again. So that's the first for loop. Then we go down to our 2 for loops here. And so the first for loop is the same thing as the int up here. It's the same for loop, but the only thing that I added to this was the second for loop, which is basically placing the numbers after the period. So this for loop up here places the number before the period, and then this one places the numbers after the period. And then once we run all of that, we total up the results as like before, and then we just return it. So that's the conversions, and then here we have our method overloaded function called sum, and then it's just changing the parameters. So the first one is just integer, second is double, and third is string. So that's the code, and now to run this to show you how it works. So our first value, let's do some integers. We'll go 15 and 10. 15 plus 10 is 25, pretty simple. Let's do another one. Let's do another integer. Well, 20 and 100. 100 plus 20 is 120. So that's the integers at work. Then we got the doubles going. 12.6, and we'll go 10.4, 23. We'll go one more double. We'll go 5.9. We'll go 10. We'll go 6. And there you go, 16.5. So that's the doubles in action. And now for the strings, we got ABC, and then we'll just do EFG. And there you go. So those are the strings. Let's do one more. CSC, go CSUDH. Boom. So that's that. And then our last one, it is basically just a combination of all of them. So we'll go here, then we'll go words, and then we'll put in 9. Let's do a dot, and then we'll put happy. There you go. So that's the code. Just compiles anything, any data type that you choose, and it's going to sum it up together, or in this case the strings. You're just going to put them together, and that's the code. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Appreciate it. Have a good night.